Okay, lesson 71, the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula has a lot to do with what algebra actually is. And it's working with a quadratic equation. We've found several ways to solve a quadratic equation. One is by, if there's factors that we can get out of it, and by the 3 and the 5. Another one is by completing the square. And today we're going to learn how to solve a quadratic equation by using a quadratic formula. But first of all, we're going to talk about how we found that quadratic formula, how it works, how we come by it. Here is the beautiful quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And this should be memorized because you're going to use it a lot. It's kind of a big thing, kind of almost a breakthrough thing in algebra. We're going to do the class practice. The first one says begin with ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 and derive the quadratic formula. So we're going to talk about how we actually found the quadratic formula, who invented it or invented it, how we can find mathematically that it holds true. What the quadratic formula is it's something that goes x equals. So right away we could plug in our information for x into it and solve our problem. But to get that formula that goes x equals, we start with a normal quadratic equation that looks like this, where we've got a x squared, so this a can be any number, plus bx, the b can be any number, plus c, and the c is any number, equals 0. And we're going to solve this equation for x. And by doing that, by solving this ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 for x, we're going to invent the quadratic, not invent, but we're going to discover for ourselves the quadratic formula. So first step is going to be to divide everything by a, and we get x squared plus b over a x equals plus c over a equals 0. Okay? And now the next step is going to be using that completing the square that we talked about before. And remember, to complete the square, we look at the second term, we cut it in half, and then we square that. So we're going to go b over a and go times 1 over 2. This is dividing it in half, and b times 1 is b over 2a. And then we need to square this, square it, and we get b squared over 4a squared. Okay, so we divide it in half, and then we square that, and we add that onto both sides. So we're going to add it on. So x squared plus b over a x plus b squared over 4a squared equals, and we also want to move this c over a across the equal sign. But I'm going to copy this guy down first, since this is going to be a minus. So we're going to put our b squared over 4a squared, and when we move this across the equal sign, we have to change the sign, minus c over a. All right. Now, next step is going to be to combine this business here and make this get like denominators so we can add that. So if we've got b squared over 4a squared minus c over a, let's multiply this term by 4a over 4a, and that will get us like terms. And we end up across the top with b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. So that's what we get on this side, equals b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. All right, and on this side, we're going to go ahead and factor this thing, or find the square. And if you remember, that square is always this x, and then it is this half before it's squared. So half of this term before it's squared, which is b over 2a. So x plus b over 2a equals this. And we found the square root of this side, we also need to find the square root of this side at the same time. So now we also need to find the square root of this side. and I'm going to show that as the square root of that. And remember, when we do the square root of a fraction, we can show one big radicand over the whole thing, or we can make two over each, one over each. So x plus b over 2a equals the bottom 4a squared. 4 is a perfect square. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of a squared is a. And then on top we get b squared minus 4ac. And this is plus or minus. Now the last step is to remove this b plus 2a and push it across. So a equals, when we move it across, we change to a negative. So negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, and now we've got 2a and 2a, so we can combine that. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, we have found for ourselves the quadratic formula. That's how it looks. Now we're going to take this quadratic formula and plug in this information and solve and work right down this side of the paper, hopefully. We'll see if it works. So, x equals, I'm going to draw my big line here, make it nice and big. Negative b, our b term is negative 6, so negative 6 is positive 6. So we're going to go 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared. B is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is 36. Minus 4ac. So a is 2, c is 4. Since we're going 4a and c, we go 4 times a. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 4 is 36. So 36. Oh boy. Oh boy. This is going to be interesting. And over 2a. And our a term is 2. So we get 4 there. So x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 36 is 0 over 4. Okay, so where I made my mistake is in this negative 4ac. We're going to go 4 times a is 4 times 2 is 8 times 4 is 32 and not 36. So this is minus 32. So then we come up with x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 32 is 4 over 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. So x equals 6 plus or minus 2 over 4. And then we can solve that two ways, which equals 6 plus 2 is 8 over 4, which equals 2. Or we can go 6 minus 2, which is 4 over 4, which equals 1. So our answer is either 2 or 1. There we go, it's solved for us.